G'day everybody, welcome back to tutorial number 4 in the Selecting Objects / RTS Controls series. In this video I'm going to start work on the feature a few people have requested, and that is the selection rectangle, like the drag on the screen to create a box to select multiple units at once. In this video I'm going to focus on the GUI element first, so creating the actual rectangle itself that you'll be able to see on the screen, so the representation of which units you're actually selecting, or objects I should say. So we're going to need a few things to make this work. The first of those is we're going to need an actual sprite to represent the rectangle itself, even though it's just a bit of a border. I've done a bit of experimenting and I've found that using a draw line method and that sort of thing isn't particularly ideal. I've found this to be sort of one of the more simple ways to achieve it. So whichever imaging editing program you use is fine. I'm using a program called allie-writes-code, which if you haven't seen that before, it's a really good little sprite editor, I guess. I quite like it, but it's up to you. As long as it supports transparency and allows you to sort of export as multiple file formats or whatever you prefer, it should be fine. So the sprite I'm going to use, as you can see, is just 3 pixels by 3 pixels in size, and all I've done is sort of create a bit of a border here, so a 3 by 3 pixel border around the center pixel, which is just a transparent or an empty pixel. And once again, as long as this image does need to have a transparent background, so it does need to have some sort of transparency to it. So once again, 3 pixels by 3 pixels with the center one blank or empty. You could probably even put, well, like I've done, I've created a bit of a transparent sprite in there, so it's got a bit of a green tint, but you can't actually see it in the game. I need to adjust that, doesn't matter. We'll save a copy of that. I'm going to save it as a PNG, but it doesn't really matter. Save it as whatever you like. As long as, like I said, it has transparency, you'll be okay. So I'm going to call it select square, just something simple, and I'm saving that in the assets folder of this project. And it's going to complain at me, but that's okay, doesn't matter. So back in Unity, we can see that sprite here now, and we'll need to change a few things on that, but we'll get to that in a second. The first thing we need to do now is create a UI image. That's going to add a few things into our scene, a few massive things by the looks of it. The first of those is it creates a canvas. It's created an image component within that, and an event system. That's default behavior. Whenever you add a UI element, it will attach it to a canvas if you don't have one already, and it'll create an event system. We don't need to worry about the event system because we're not really interacting with this UI element at the moment, so don't worry about that, but just leave it in there. What we are going to look at though is the image element itself. There's a couple of things we need to do with that. The first of that is we want to adjust the anchor, I guess it is. We click on this little square here, the little crosshair. It will basically bring up a nice easy selection sort of thing. If you hold Alt and click on the center there, it'll just anchor it to the center. So we can see here it's added itself to the center of this canvas. It is absolutely massive, like you can't even see our little game, all our little cubes down here. Don't worry too much about that. Unity will handle the size of this when you actually run the game. So we need to change a couple of things with the image itself. The first of those is we want to add the select square as the source image, which I can't do because I need to change a couple of things on it first. Apologies. We'll go to the select square, the sprite itself, and we need to change the texture type to be a sprite 2D and UI. And I don't think we need to do anything more with that at the moment. I'll just apply that. Don't worry about the warning. And if we go back to the image under the canvas, we should now be able to add it as the source image. There we go, select square. So we'll just add that. Don't worry about color, the material, any of that. We're going to change the image type though to be sliced, and it's now going to complain that it doesn't have a border, so we'll sort that out. Go back to the sprite, and on the sprite itself, go to sprite editor here. And what we're going to do is just basically drag these borders here to, or drag these to create some borders, just to keep Unity happy. And it's just sort of defining the borders of that object. We'll apply it. You can see here it's changed the look of that. It's going to look a bit nicer in a second, bear with me. So now that we've done that, once again I don't think there's anything more we need to do with the sprite. I'll go back to the image under the canvas, and now that it's sliced, stop complaining, and we're going to untick fill center. And you'll notice when we do that, we get a beautiful like outlined box here, just with like a 1 pixel border. So nothing too fancy at the moment, it's just hovering there in space doing its own thing. Cool. On the canvas itself, I'm just going to have a quick look at that. I don't think we actually need to change anything on the canvas, I think it's alright as it is. Just quickly confirming that, won't be one moment. Yep, that all looks good. Cool. Once again, back on the sprites, everything's good there. Cool. Alright, so that's the setup. That's the first sort of step we're using. We've got the image itself, we've got the canvas that's going to sit on the screen, and it's basically just going to be hidden for most of the time. It's only going to be visible when we need it. So we're going to start writing the script now, and I'm just going to create a new C# script. We'll call it, I don't know, select rectangle, select box, that'll do. So we're keeping the actual GUI side of things, so the displaying. Oh, there we go. Don't worry about that. We're keeping the two separate. So the actual selection of units itself. So when we code in to check within the rectangle and find which units are there and blah blah blah. We're going to do that in the next video, obviously, but we're going to keep that to its own script. So the script we're writing now is only to handle the actual drawing of the rectangle itself on the screen. So, what are we going to do? Let's have a bit of a look. Now, we're going to need a few variables for this. The first of those is we actually need to define which image is our rectangle, so we'll do that. We'll say hide an inspector, private. I'm going to make it a rect transform object, and we'll call it select square image. And we're going to drag and drop that one in the editor. We're also going to need two other variables, two vector 3s. The first one we'll call start pos, so this is going to be the start position of the square, and the second one we're going to call end pos. Nice and straightforward. In our start method, what should we do? Alright, well the first thing we want to do, when the game starts, we don't need to see the square all the time, we only want it at certain times, so the first thing I'm going to do is basically set the select square image to be inactive so that we can't see it. So I'm going to say select square image dot game object to get the game object, and we're just going to do a set active false, so that should become inactive in the hierarchy. We won't be able to see it or really interact with it. It's just going to be there, invisible, not doing anything. Okay, that's the start function, nice and easy. In update, let's start working on that. Okay, so similar to the other scripts, we're going to want this to work when we're interacting with the mouse. So the first thing we'll do is we'll say, okay, if the player presses the mouse button down, so if input dot get mouse button down, it's going to be the left click, so 0. So if the player presses the left mouse button, we're going to fire a raycast. We'll make it a raycast hit, we'll just call it hit, that's good enough. And if, and you should be familiar with this, if physics dot raycast, and like last time, we're going to do a similar sort of method, camera dot main dot, what is it, screen point to ray, from input dot mouse position. So it's going to fire from the mouse position. We'll store the result in hit, and we'll make it mathf.infinity. Cool. So at the moment, whatever you click on, it doesn't matter. If it hits anything, it's going to do the following. I'm not using a layer mask for this one because it shouldn't really need to. Okay, so if we fire, so we'll fire the raycast. If it hits, what we're going to do is say that start pos is equal to hit.point. So the point at which the raycast hits something, that's going to be our start position. The z-axis doesn't matter too much with this because we're only going to be displaying it on the screen. All we really need is that start point, just to try and help it line up with the actual game world itself. So under update, that's all we need for the left click down. We're going to say if input dot mouse button up. So this is when the player actually releases the mouse button, the left mouse button. What do we need to do? We're just basically going to set that object to be false again. So we'll say select square image dot game object dot set active We'll make it true. No, we won't. We'll make it false. Blech. There we go, much better. Nice and straightforward. So when the player releases the left mouse button, if the square is on the screen, it's just going to set it to false so you can't see it anymore, which is pretty standard behavior. You know, you don't really need that square on screen all the time, so it's not going to matter. Okay, what else have we got here? Let's have a bit of a look. So if the player is holding down the mouse button, and this is where we're going to start to do some of the fun stuff, this is sort of going to be the important part. So if input.getMouseButton, so if the player is holding the mouse button, okay. The first thing we need to do is, as you may already be aware, the object, the image itself is currently, or should be, disabled at this point. It's not active, so we need to make it active. We're going to do a check as well, so this isn't running every single frame. So if select, what am I doing? Select square image dot game object dot active in hierarchy. So we're basically saying if, and notice the exclamation mark there to basically say if this object isn't active currently, if it isn't active in hierarchy, then we're going to make it active. So select square image dot game object dot set active, and this time we're going to do true. There we go. So if the player is holding down the mouse and the object isn't active already, then we're going to make it active so that we can see it, and so it's actually going to do some stuff, which is, you know, relatively important. Next thing we'll need as well, so we've already got a start pos, the start position of the rectangle. Now we just need the end pos, and because that end pos is going to change based on where your mouse actually is, we're going to do that every single frame. We're going to recalculate it as part of this, as part of the player holding down the mouse. It's going to continuously recalculate where that end position is, and that's really easy. We're just going to say end pos is equal to input.mouse position. Nice and easy, very straightforward. So the end point of that square, so you know, you've got your top left corner, for example, your bottom right corner where you're currently dragging the mouse is going to be at your mouse. You know, it's going to be at the mouse position, so that makes sense. Okay, what else do we need? Alright, so we're now going to grab we're going to create another vector 3, and we're going to take that start position, we're going to alter it a little bit and store it in this vector, you'll see. We'll say vector 3. So we're creating a new one, and we'll just call it square start. We're going to make it equal camera.main.world to screen point, and we'll just put in the start pos. So we're taking the position of the raycast, we're taking that position we stored earlier in the get mouse button down, and we're basically converting it to a point on the screen, and we're storing that as the start variable. Now it shouldn't change at all, it is recalculating it. I suppose we could technically only do that once, but whatever, this is how I wrote it, I'm just going to roll with it for now. Probably even just do it at the start there. I don't know, it doesn't matter. Okay, and for square start, we're going to grab the Z coordinate. We're just going to say 0, because it doesn't matter. We don't need the Z coordinate, the Z axis for that at all. Okay, so hopefully that's straightforward so far. The next point we need to do, we need to create another vector 3, and we're going to call this the center. We're going to be getting the center point of this, between the start and the end. We need to find the middle, the center. So we're going to do that nice and easy by saying that square start plus end pos, so the two positions, divided by 2. So halfway between the two. Should be easy. Okay, what do we need now? We want to actually, using the start, the end, we're going to calculate the size of it. So we'll create 2 floats. The first one we'll call size x, and we'll use mathf.abs, so we'll find the absolute value. So if these end up being negative values, minus values, this will just give us the same value but as a positive instead. We're going to use square start.x minus npos.x. So it should find the difference between those two values and then give it to us as a positive number. And we'll do the same for y. What's that? Size y is equal to mathf.absolute. Same again, square start.y minus npos.y. So that's giving us the size of the square, or at least giving us two values that we can use to adjust the size of the square. And now the final step, and this is pretty much it for the entire script. We need to actually now change the size of the square, and we're going to do that. I think I've missed a step 2 actually. I have. Don't worry, I'll get to that one in a second. We're going to say that the select square image dot sizeDelta. Oops, nope, not like that. sizeDelta equals new vector 2, because the sizeDelta is usually a vector 2. We're just going to use size x and then size y, like so. And the thing I forgot, sorry about this, you know how we stored the center of the object? We actually need to use that center to tell the object where it's going to be positioned. So it'll just adjust the position of the object to ensure that it's not, as it's scaling, it's going to actually move the object a bit so that the scaling looks natural. So if you were to just keep it in the same point and scale it, your square would basically, scale in either direction, up, down, left, right, but it would do it for both sides at once. So rather than you're dragging and creating a nice rectangle, you're going to end up with like a weird square that just sort of gets bigger and smaller and doesn't actually follow your mouse very accurately. So what we're going to do is say that what do we need? Selection square image. So select square image dot position is equal to center. So because we're constantly recalculating that one, it should always keep the center of that object relative to where our mouse is and where we need it to be. That should be the entire script, guys. Whoa, they're thinking, no way, this is supposed to be difficult. I know, right? That's what I thought too. But hey, there you go. That's why I do all the fun stuff to work this out, so that you don't have to. I'm just going to save that. Just quickly double checking to make sure I haven't missed anything. Just referring to my script here that I've created earlier. Here's one we created earlier. All looks pretty good. We'll soon find out if it doesn't work, I suppose. So save that. Go back to Unity. And we're going to actually need to drag and drop that script onto something, so we'll keep it consistent. I've been putting stuff on the main camera already, so once again, doesn't matter where you put this, but just for the sake of consistency, I'm going to drag that script and put it on the main camera, just like we did with the last one. Now, there's one more thing we're going to need as well. I'm just going to zoom back into here, get the camera back. Now, as you notice, we are firing a raycast. So if that raycast doesn't hit anything, this function's not going to work. Now, I'm working on the assumption that if you're using something like this in your game, you've probably got like a ground or something in the background. You don't necessarily have to have a visible object. As long as it's something for the raycast to hit, that's all that matters. So I'm just going to create something very simple. We'll create a 3D object, cube. Position it at 0, 0, 0, just so it's centered in relation to everything else. And I'll make it like 20 by 20. That should be fine. You can see in the game window here that's sort of acting as a bit of a background. The white is annoying. I'm going to I'm just going to duplicate this material and call it black. And I'll just make that black. I'll get rid of the smoothness as well. Cool, and we'll just drag and drop that onto the cube. Now, because I haven't defined any layer masks to use either, it doesn't matter what this raycast hits, because if you click on a unit, you don't really want there to be any difference between the raycast hitting the ground or the raycast hitting an object. It doesn't matter in this regard. I'm not going to assign that to a layer. I'm just going to leave it on the default layer. So there we have it. Alright, now I'm just going to quickly save this, save the project, and I'm going to run it. And with a bit of luck, as long as I haven't forgotten anything, which I probably have, this should work. So we'll have a bit of a look. When it runs, come on Unity. Oh, unless we are already. I'll just maximize that, sorry. Oh, hello. I've forgotten to do something. Doesn't matter. I know what I forgot to do. Aha, straight away, see? Null reference exception. Always watch the console. On the main camera, I forgot to assign a variable. Oops. And I'm being silly. I used, instead of hide and inspector, we want to do serialize field. I don't know why I did that. I'm just being silly. So that's on the select box script, sorry. So yeah, serialize field, not hide and inspector. That was silly. Go back to Unity. When that updates, you'll see it here. So we've got the script here. With a bit of luck, that should just change and allow us to now assign what have I done? Oh, it hasn't saved. Silly. There we go. Save the script. That helps. When it updates, we should see it now. There we go. Select square image. So we actually need to drag and drop the image on the canvas. So canvas image. I'm just going to drag and drop that in. Bam. Cool. Now if we run it, it should work. See, I like to think my mistakes are like a bit of personalization for you guys, you know. See, I'm not perfect. Here we go. Boom! Look at that! Oh wow! Doesn't that look good? I mean, obviously you can have it whatever color you like. It doesn't matter. But that's it working. That's the square at least. That's the GUI side of things. Like I said, in the next video we're going to cover actually selecting the units. So, you know, when you do this, it's going to do and release the mouse. It's actually going to check and find which objects fall within that square, and then it will select them. We still have the same functions working from before with the control and the click and the toggle and all the good things, and the right click to deselect. That's all still there. That's all still working, and you can see it's not really impacted too much. There is a bit of weirdness there, like when you click, it's sort of highlighting an object straight away. Yeah, we can tinker with that later. But the important thing is we've got the square going, the rectangle, the GUI side of things, which is what we wanted. So thanks for watching, guys. Stick around, watch the next video, and we'll get the selection side of things working. Oh, exciting days. I'll see you then.